a conflict that rattled the globe, shook alliances, and drew the gaze of every superpower. Russia invaded Ukraine, but here's the catch. This isn't America's war. Not legally, not technically. So why are U.S. taxpayers footing the bill for billions in weapons, training, and economic aid? Let's start with the obvious. The U.S., NATO, the EU, and the UK are involved, both directly and indirectly. Why? Because this isn't just a fight for Ukraine. It's a fight for the rules that keep the world in order. If Russia can take a country by force without consequences, other nations might try the same thing. Borders become suggestions, treaties are meaningless, and global stability crumbles. The West watches and acts to prevent a dangerous precedent. Yet it's not boots on the ground for Americans. No, Washington chose a proxy strategy, sending weapons, intelligence, and money to strengthen Ukraine without putting its own soldiers in direct combat. It's expensive, yes, but it's cheaper than facing a wider war in Europe, a war that could cost trillions and countless lives. And here's where it gets interesting. Ukraine doesn't owe the U.S. anything. No repayment, no territorial concessions, no financial strings. The billions in aid are grants, not loans. The only cost for Ukraine is political and strategic alignment, following guidance on military operations, cooperating on reforms, and supporting Western sanctions against Russia. The U.S. gets loyalty, accountability, and shared objectives, but nothing tangible comes back in dollars. Which leads to a natural question. Is the U.S. losing taxpayer money? In a direct sense, yes. Every rocket, every bullet, every dollar spent on Ukrainian defense comes from the American people. But the U.S. doesn't see it as a loss. It's an investment in stability, alliances, and influence. Contain Russia here, prevent escalation there, and signal to China, Iran, and other potential challengers. Aggression has consequences. Now, some might ask, does America have a formal obligation to help Ukraine? The answer is no. Ukraine is not a NATO member, and Article 5, the clause that obligates NATO countries to defend one another, does not apply. America's involvement is entirely voluntary, driven by strategy, morality, and political calculation. Washington could, in theory, walk away tomorrow. But let's not forget, the U.S. is part of NATO, and that changes the stakes subtly. While Ukraine itself is not covered under the treaty, the credibility of NATO and America's commitment to its allies is on the line. Support for Ukraine is also a signal to Europe and the world that NATO is alive. America is engaged, and aggression will meet resistance, direct or indirect. So here's the paradox. America is spending money, risking political fallout, and projecting power for a war that isn't technically its own. Ukraine doesn't have to pay back a dime. NATO doesn't require it. Yet the U.S. stays in, not out of obligation, but because the cost of doing nothing is far higher. This is modern geopolitics in shock and awe terms, a proxy war of strategy, influence, and global messaging. It's about containing Russia, reinforcing alliances, maintaining the credibility of NATO, and protecting the post-World War II order. And it's about signaling to the world that America's presence, voluntary, costly, and calculated, still matters. In the end, the lesson is simple. War is never just what it appears to be. This isn't America's war, but America's choices define its outcome. The money leaves U.S. coffers, the weapons fly to the front lines, and yet the power of influence, the credibility of alliances, and the signal to the world that America stands is priceless. Because in today's world, sometimes choosing to act is more important than being forced to act. And that choice, voluntary, calculated, and expensive, is exactly what keeps America at the center of the global chessboard.